everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of the Mythicast. If you haven't been following us on social media, you might be wondering why Spencer is letting the guests do the intro to this episode. But Spencer, can you give everyone an update on how the Mythicast is going to be operating going forward?
Yeah, so I am no longer the host. I have invited our friend Mike here to kind of just take over, man.
Yeah, and I'm super excited to be here, part of the Constructive Criticism Always Improving family. I'm super passionate about the Mythicast in terms of what it's all about. As someone who has grinded to Arena Mythic every month that it's been around, someone who plays a ton of Arena. When Wizards sent my beta stats and I saw I played 6,000 matches in a year, I had to kind of take a step back and realize just how much Magic I've been playing. But, I love Arena, I love Magic, and I'm really excited to bring not only the current members of the family, Constructed Criticism, but new listeners as well into the Constructed Criticism Always Improving family and let them know not only what decks they should be playing, but how they should go about maximizing their time to get from bronze, silver, gold, all the way up into those mythic ranks.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you. I think that you're going to do a great job. And I when you reached out to me about something else and I reached back out about this, I think it was a little bit of a surprise to you, but I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. So am I. When I reached out to you, I was not expecting you to say, "Hey, man, you want to host the show?" But I'm really happy you did. I'm excited to be here. And with that being said, everyone, welcome my first ever guest, Spencer Howland. Spencer, how's it going?
It's going well, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, so I know you're not used to being on the other side of the video conference, but nonetheless, Spencer, I know a lot of people who listen to this cast are very familiar with you and all the members of the Constructed Criticism family. But for those of us who might be new listeners, can you tell us a little bit about how you started playing Magic and what Magic meant to you when you started playing?
Yeah, I started playing Magic when I was a really little kid. Yeah, I remember, wanting all the Raging Goblins and stuff like that. So one of those kids, and Thor Elemental, I thought was just broken and stuff like that. Eventually, I took a step to stop playing Magic, started doing other things, and after high school, I kind of found it again when I was around 18, 19 years old. And I kind of just fell in love immediately. I went to my first tournament, had like a winning record with some bullcrap deck at my first tournament, and just kind of fell in love. And 2 Utah State championships, a Pro Tour qualification, and thousands and thousands of dollars won, and made around the game since then. I'm all in now. Have a YouTube channel, multiple podcasts. I've done 100 episodes of multiple podcasts. Limited time only and Constructive Criticism both passed that mark, and that's just not something a lot of Magic players going to say when it comes to being a part of the podcast community.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering for you, when did you realize, wait a minute, this is more than just like a casual hobby? Was it one of those state championships, getting that first Pro Tour qualification? When did it hit you that this is a big part of your life? It's not just kind of a casual thing you do on the side.
Yeah, so the Pro Tour definitely wasn't it, because I was actually getting ready to kind of like take a little bit of a step back from Magic at that time. I wasn't like, I had just started a new job, and my wife and I were thinking about getting pregnant again, or getting pregnant for the first having a child for the first time, I should say. Yeah. We had been pregnant, but kind of things were just changing in my life at that time. I did take a week off for that Pro Tour though. Got ready. Got to make my first day 2-3 of my first Pro Tour draft. Like it was a really cool experience. But the podcast had been going for a while before that. I had an old podcast before Constructive Criticism that wasn't very good, and I knew that it was something that I enjoyed, and so what I really wanted was to help people get better at Magic the way that in a way that was really easily accessible. At the time, we had PTQs, old school PTQs, that are kind of back now, and it was there, but there wasn't like MTG Goldfish didn't exist. But you would get like online deck lists were like kind of not that popular. People still like had a thing against net deckers at that time, and every week on the show we come up with a power rankings, just like here are the 5 decks that you need to be able to beat to go win your PTQ. I qualified for the Pro Tour. I think all of my co-hosts but one qualified for the Pro Tour. Top 8 GPs got silver. It was a really cool experience to kind of go through the first few years of CCMTG, get better as we did the show, and all qualify for the Pro Tour. It was pretty cool. I think that I knew that Magic was more than a hobby, probably around I don't know, probably after that first state championship.
Okay.
And like I've never taken it as seriously as some of my friends have as far as the competing side. Like I only go to drivable Grand Prix other than a couple, and it's not like I'm about to go quit my job and go on the SCG tour or anything like that.
Yeah, well, that'd be a little tough being out west anyway. But I get what you're saying. So, I know you just mentioned, when you and your wife are thinking about having a kid, and as I've seen on our webcams when we've chatted, you have a little kid now. So how do you balance Magic with being a father, being a husband, having a full-time job? How do you find the time for Magic to be a part of your life the way you want it to be?
Yeah, I mean it's gotten a lot harder as that my career has kind of gotten more serious. Surprisingly, the more money you make, the more they expect of you.
Yeah, it's crazy how that happens.
and so I've kind of had to balance that over the last couple of years. But Maxwell's pretty cool. Like he knows when I'm podcasting, he's technically not supposed to come in, and my wife is really cool about it. She knows that like this is my hobby. This is the thing that like brings me happiness. So I try and get X number of matches in to just be prepared for the podcast and for any upcoming tournaments that I might have. One of the cool things about Magic is there is an amount of base that I've just kind of developed. I have a lot of the fundamentals down. I mean, not to say that like when I take a long break, I definitely get rusty, make mistakes, and so for that reason, before a big event, I'm gonna play a bunch of matches. But for the most part, it's usually like 20, 30 matches a week on Arena, 5 to 10 additional on MTGO, then some drafts. Just kind of that's about the Magic that I play, but I'm consuming Magic content all the time. And that baseline that I developed over time really helps me kind of keep my win percentage high enough to compete. And I play Arena basically for free at this point. I didn't spend, I think I buy the bundle at the beginning just so that I, can make any decks that I want right away. But yeah, that's about it.
All right, awesome. And before we talk about Arena, I know you mentioned that you play Magic Online a bunch. And if you're going to be playing Magic Online, there's no better place to be getting your Magic Online cards than MTGOtraders.com. So whether you're playing Modern, Legacy, if you're even playing Standard, even though Arena has Standard, right? Just today there was a PTQ on Arena or on Magic Online. And if you want to be playing those events, you need to be getting your cards from MTGOtraders.com. And if you want to find out about the latest things happening on Magic Online, Pure MTGO is where you want to be. So make sure you're going to Pure MTGO and MTOtraders.com. But this podcast is not about Magic Online, Spencer. It's about Magic Arena. And I know it's called the Mythic Cast, but ironically, Spencer, you are not in Mythic, are you?
No, I am not today, no.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting to talk about that, though, because we talk about balancing and playing Magic and only having X amount of time. So when you play Magic Arena, do you play the ranked queues or do you play other modes on the program?
I played a little bit of ranked the last week or so. With this deck, I've played a lot of ranked. It's not really fun to play in the dumpsters, though, because you just win really quickly, which is fine. It's just not really helpful. So, more metagame challenge, stuff like that. Also, one of the reasons that it's so easy for me to play Arena for free is that I just play the constructed queues.
Yeah.
And it's also really nice for me as a dad, having that block that's set up like, hey, like you're going to play one of these today, go play one of these. And then if I look at my watch and I have time for a second one, I can jam a second one, right? Whereas, it's just way too easy. I don't think it's healthy for me to play ranked, if I'm being completely honest. Like as a dad and as somebody with like a full-time job, it's just too easy to queue up again. So for that reason, I just haven't been playing them. I have hit Mythic multiple times.
Yeah, of course.
So it's certainly not that I am incapable of hitting Mythic. I just don't play the ranked ladder right now.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting to bring up because the ranked ladder, it's really just a time sink, and it's really difficult because just when you think you got a handle on things, you realize it's the 28th of the month, and you're getting sent back down to Platinum 4 a few weeks later or a few days later. So it really is just a constant time commitment and real commitment to get to that Mythic rank. So Spencer, when you grinded to Mythic, what was your goal in getting to Mythic? Was it a pride thing? Did you want to qualify for the MCQW? What was your main motivation for getting there?
So the first time I hit Mythic, they didn't have an MCQW.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, like, so there was one time where I was like going to qualify for the MCQW, I got myself, I think, to 60 on
Okay.
ladder, and then I kind of went back to my computer a couple weeks later and was like 400 and something, played a match, dropped to 9 something, played a match, dropped under it, and I was like, well, I am not going to do this.
Yeah, it definitely can be very unhealthy if you kind of put pressure on yourself to get there. And the emphasis of a number, it's just a moment in time, but if you put a ton of value in that you are the 896th best player on Arena and a loss sends you back 400, it can get mentally taxing.
Sure. The thing is that they hadn't announced the date for the tournament yet at this time, and I was like, well, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to play in this. I have 2 events coming up on multiple weekends in this month. If it lands on either of them, I'm just not going to be able to play it. So I kind of just didn't worry about it. And then I actually just haven't gone back on since then, as far as like trying to hit Mythic. So
yeah, that's totally fair. And it's really tough too the way they set it up, because when you're in Platinum and Diamond, it's you win a match, you get 2 little pips. You lose a match, you lose 2 with a little protection. But once you hit Mythic, it's not a 50-50 balance. If you win twice and lose twice, you're going to go down in rank, which makes it an extra layer of difficulty getting to the top. So when you were up in Mythic, were you actively trying to shoot for number 1, or was I'm going to play matches, see where I end up, and hope for the best type of thing?
I was actually actively trying to shoot for 69.
Okay.
Which I didn't get. I got 60, which was really upsetting.
Yeah, I'm happy to say I've hit 69 before. And the obligatory nice tweet.
Nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
You got to do it.
Yeah, I didn't. Like I said, I went to 60. I'm bet if I had logged on one of those days, I could have finagled my way in there from the drop to 60 to whatever I dropped to. But
yeah. All right. Well, as great as Arena is, we're here to talk about a deck today, and I think this is one of those rare times where in Standard there is a true tier 0 deck. So Spencer, what deck are we talking about today?
Yeah, so today we're just going to talk about, this is specifically Bant Golos, so not to be confused with Fire's Golos or Sultai Golos. This is the Bant version of the deck.
Okay, and I'm glad you brought up the Fires version. So what has led you to playing this version over the Fires version? I mean, we're going to go into the card selection in general, but have you tried both versions? Was there something about this one that just resonated with you more?
Yeah, so I think that the Fires version is interesting if you expect different things. One of my problems with Fire's Golos, though, is just that you're not actually you're not the better Golos deck. You're just the more powerful deck. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure that that's where I want to be. I don't know if that's where I want to be. I know that one of the things that the Fire deck is better at is it does get to play all 4 Fave Wishes and happily does it. So that's I think a powerful thing for those style of the deck. But I think that you're playing 4 of an enchantment that doesn't advance your game plan in a ramp deck. And as a longtime ramp lover, I built the deck that qualified my friend Casey Bloodworth for the Pro Tour in a green-red ramp deck. I've won a state championship now with 2 different rampish decks. I didn't win that first one. I conceded in the quarters. But I've done well. Cashed Grand Prix with ramp decks. These are just the kind of decks that I love. Fire's Invention just doesn't fit in those decks.
Okay. Great. So I think we should go through the 75 cards that you've selected for your deck, and then we'll talk about a few key ones. So when we look at these 75 cards, we have 3 Arboreal Grazers, a Kenrith the Return King, 4 Hydroid Krasis, 4 Golos Tireless Pilgrim, 3 Realm Cloak Giant, a Beanstalk Giant, 2 Fae of Wishes, 2 Teferi Time Raveler, 4 Growth Spiral, 3 Once Upon a Time, 1 Time Wipe, 4 Circuitous Route, and then we have a whole bunch of lands. So we have a Blossoming Sands, an Azorius Guildgate, a Boros Guildgate, a Castle Vantress, 2 Breeding Pools, 2 Fabled Passages, 4 Field of the Dead, 2 Hollow Fountain, 2 Forests, 2 Temple Gardens, 2 Islands, an Orzhov Guildgate, a Golgari Guildgate, a Plains, a Plaza of Harmony, a Tranquil Cove, a Temple of Mystery, a Simic Guildgate, a Temple of Malady, and then in our sideboard we have 2 Veil of Summer, 2 Assassin's Trophy, a Devout Decree, a Plaza of Harmony, an Ashiok Dreamrender, a Deafening Clarion, 2 Negates, a Prison Realm, a Jace Welder of Mysteries, an Ethereal Absolution, a Time Wipe, and a Garruk Cursed Huntsman. Okay. I'm pretty confident.
There's a lot of one-ofs in a deck that needs to play 7 different lands of the type and plays a wish package.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that even though this is my first episode, I will never read more unique cards coming out of a deck on this podcast. But I never say never. But when we look at your main 60, there are definitely some cards here that I would consider keys to the deck. And I think the first two we have to talk about are kind of the namesake of this deck, right? The Golos and Field. So when we talk about Golos, Tireless Pilgrim, why don't you explain to everyone what makes that card so powerful in this deck specifically?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. So the obvious thing is that it goes and gets Field of the Dead. And if you've played the game correctly, meaning that you've prioritized getting lands of different types and you've built your deck in a way where you have lots of lands of different types, then either that turn or the next turn you're going to start making zombies. And that's pretty good. The other thing is that it is almost trivial to get to Wooburg 2 in this deck.
Yeah.
So you activate Golos a lot.
I know. It's actually crazy how often you can activate it, how often you can double activate it if the game starts to drag in the mirror. And when we talk about Field of the Dead, I think everyone knows about this card. It's the boogeyman in the format, just producing zombies. And I think, if you've paid attention to Magic, when lands have powerful effects, it generally can lead to some busted things in a game because they're such a hard card type to interact with. But one card that I think is the key to this deck, and I want to talk about, is Once Upon a Time, because conventional wisdom, almost every list I've seen has played the full 4 copies. So what caused you to cut a copy of that card in your deck, Spencer?
Yeah, so there's actually 2 things that I mean, you could say 3 depending on who you are, but I'm actually also only playing 28 lands. So I'm playing 28 lands and only 3 Once Upon a Time. Once Upon a Time is really good. I think that it's a lot better with, in all honesty, I think that card's a lot better with when you have 4 Grazer. And as you start trimming Grazer, like, I know that there's lots of lists that play 4 of them that only play 2 Grazer still, but I just think that the card is basically the best thing to do on turn 1, the same turn that you play your Grazer. The thing is that it's really good, right? You have tons of high impact cards. You have Hydroid Krasis, you have Fae of Wishes, you have Golos, you have Kenrith, you have Realm Cloak Giant that you get off of it. And the thing is that I'm already playing 4 Wrath effects in the form of a Time Wipe. So some lists have gone all the way down to like just 2 and 4 and 4 Once Upon a Times. I actually just prefer the Wrath effects. I think that you want the full 4 regardless. So as you're trying to fit in different cards, I wanted a Beanstalk Giant. I think that card's really good. I wanted 3 Grazer. Once Upon a Time just kind of became the natural thing to cut. I mean, you could probably just make the argument, cut 2 Teferis, add another Beanstalk Giant, add another Once Upon a Time, and your deck could probably be just as good.
Yeah. The thing is with the tier 0 deck, at the end of the day, it's still a tier 0 deck. There's only so much you can do to mess it up as long as you're not cutting the Field and the Golos. But one interesting thing I noticed about the construction of your deck is that I've seen a lot of people say that you're going to play Kenrith or you're going to play Fae of Wishes. It's kind of, you're going to win with Kenrith, giving that monstrous Beanstalk Giant haste and trample, or you're going to Fae of Wishes and go get your Jace. But you're playing both of those in your deck. So what led you to have kind of both of those angles for this 75?
Yeah, I think it would be pretty silly. I think that you should just be playing 1 Kenrith at least. And I like the Fae package so much that it was like, I just cut a Fae for a Kenrith. That's basically all that happened. Is I was like, I have 3 Fae. I think that 3 Fae is like really good. I don't really want the 4th one. And when I was thinking like, okay, well, what kind of effect is this Kenrith supposed to be having on the game? It's supposed to be allowing me to use a lot of my mana, and it's supposed to be winning me the game. So I need to cut something like that. So I could have cut a Hydroid Krasis, but I didn't really want to do that. One of the reasons that the Fires deck can play less Hydroid Krasis is because it's not as good in that deck. Whereas with Fae of Wishes, I think that you very much, I could have a better sideboard too if I got down on them because I'm like less incentivized to play a bunch of weird stuff.
Yeah, I guess if you're going to cut a Fae, the Wish board starts to become less of a relevant thing. But what would you say are the cards you fetch up most with Fae? Would it be Jace going for that mill condition victory, or is it really just whatever the game calls for?
Yeah, surprisingly, the cards, I mean, you're definitely getting Deafening Clarion and Time Wipe quite a bit. It's pretty often that you get those kind of cards. Weirdly enough, I don't usually grab the Jace in the mirror. If you actually grab Ethereal Absolution, you actually usually win in 2 turns, and there's very little that your opponent can do about it in the mirror and in other matchups. Ethereal Absolution has probably been the biggest surprise for me, but I definitely don't grab it as much as Deafening Clarion, Time Wipe, or even something like Devout Decree or Assassin's Trophy.
Okay, that's totally fair. We'll get more into the sideboard in a bit, but we're going to talk about your lands here, because in most decks, it's great. You're playing 8 of one basic, 8 of another, the duel, and we call it a day. But this deck is probably more about the lands than anything else. And you brought up an interesting point where a lot of podcasts have, a lot of deck builders have said 29 lands or even 30 is probably the right number, but you're playing 28. So how did you decide that you wanted to cut that 29th land for another card? What went into
Yeah.
that?
So a reason that they say that is, a Boreal Grazer and Growth Spiral really, really want you to have lands in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that the deck is so good and mulligans so well that I don't really see that. Like, you could play a swamp, and I have in fact played this deck with 29 lands in a swamp and be totally happy. One of the reasons to play the swamp, by the way, is sorry, I also had a Field of the Dead in my sideboard at the time. So Let me be clear. So you can play a swamp over a Field of the Dead, and then you can play. One of the things that a lot of people advocate for is actually playing either a second Plaza of Harmony or another Guildgate that's a different color.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is like the difference is pretty marginal, and it only matters so that you get screwed less, or like that you have games where your cards don't work less. But like your deck is so consistent that I don't think it's worth that marginal upside, and I would rather just have more of the cards that I want in my deck. Now, that being said, I'm obviously disagreeing with somebody great like Brad Nelson here, but I don't know. It's really not that big of a deal.
Okay. Yeah, I think, you're probably anywhere from 28 to 30. You're probably okay. But there's a couple lands that stood out to me. Number one is Castle Vantress, because I've seen a lot of people cut that land. They've said they haven't had time to activate it. They're doing other things with their mana. Have you found that Castle Vantress has been the difference in some matches? The Scry effect?
Yeah, multiple times. There was a time I actually was playing with the co-host of my other podcast, Matt Kling. He was playing on. We were just kind of on a video chat playing together, and I definitely grabbed a Field of the Dead and like looked at my lands and was like, oh man, if I had just grabbed a Castle Ventress, I don't think I could have lost this game. Next match had the exact same thing happen, grabbed the right land immediately won the match. I was like, all right, well, not cutting that land. And it's funny because you talked about how some people have cut it, and then you have people like Brian Brunduin saying that he thinks it's the best land in the entire deck.
Yeah.
And I think Brian Gottlieb said that he's off to grabbing Castle, and then Jerry T said that he was literally never not grabbing Field. So it's just like, I think there's the deck is so good. There's lots of mixed opinions on it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it comes down to. Also, when the deck is just so good, you have so many ways to build it. It's great. Did you put much thought into which gates you have? Because I've heard some conventional wisdom say if you're going to play a Dimir Guild gate, you want to play the Boros Guild gate. You want to have the 4 non-green colors, but you have quite a few black sources in your deck. I think you have the ability to create 4. You have 4 black sources if you count the Plaza of Harmony. So why were you so in on black as a color?
Yeah. So it's actually my sideboard if you look at it. So I have Assassin's Trophy.
Yep.
I have a Garrick, and I have Ethereal Absolution. So I actually just like very much needed black mana to be able to cast my spells out of my sideboard, especially since multiple of them are wish targets.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's important for people to remember that, you build a 75, it's not a 60 and then 15 extra cards. All the cards in your deck should be working together because when you think about it, you're usually playing more game 2 and 3s than game 1, right? Double the amount, in fact, if all your matches go to game 3. So you really want to make sure that your lands don't just work for your main 60, but work for you in games 2 and 3 as well, and especially if you're doing the wishboard stuff. So I think that's a really good point that we brought up. Now, what are some cool plays you've done? Because this deck gives you a lot of creativity, a lot of options. A lot of times you can win a game out of nothing. So what are some cool things you've done where you look at the board, you're like, I'm dead, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, no, I win. What are some instances like that's happened for you?
Well, let me tell you one that didn't work out.
Okay.
It should have. I should have won the game on the spot, but Arena got me.
Oh.
I was playing against Green-Black Knights, the Adventures deck.
Yeah.
And they had Lucky Clovers in play, and they were going off, and I was like, I don't know how I win this game. Like, I know that they have another knight in hand. I don't know how to win. And what I had at the time was I had a. I'm just gonna talk about the plays. Like the list is different all the time. I change my list all the time.
Yeah.
So this card's not in my sideboard anymore. But I was playing an Ambered Ego, and I egoed the drain life.
The Smith and Swordmaster, yeah.
Yeah.
The Curry favors
and
adventure.
Then immediately my opponent started casting them from exile, which they shouldn't have been able to do.
Ooh.
But Arena didn't know the difference between them being exiled via my unenamored ego and to themselves.
Yeah, did you go and check the rules to make sure that's how it works? Because I think you're right. But that's interesting.
I did not know that I was right. I thought, oh, I guess I was wrong. And then I talked about it on my other podcast, and then lots of people let me know that I was correct and I shouldn't have lost that game.
That's brutal. Yeah, at least it was it just like an unranked kind of just random arena game? Because at least it was low stakes, hopefully. But did you report that as a bug? Because that shouldn't happen.
It was actually in the 12-win event.
Oh,
It's okay. It's whatever.
Yeah.
But no, I think that lots of times, one of the cool things about having Fave Wishes in your deck is like you just get into a lot of situations where different things are coming up at different times. So, which Wrath Effect are you going to grab can be a really interesting decision. Also, what if I just grab Ethereal Absolution? Can I make that better than a Wrath Effect by just invalidating their creatures? Those kind of decisions are usually the ones that are super interesting to me. But yeah, I think that grabbing different cards at different times, just having all of those options with something like Fave Wishes. I've also thought that I was completely dead, and then I realized that I had a Time Wipe in my hand, and I could actually bounce my Fave Wishes just to pay the full mana to try and do it, since I only had the one card in my hand. So it was funny.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to pick this deck up, there's just so many angles to take. Before you hit the little gear and say concede the match, really just evaluate what you can do, because you'll find ways that you can win out of nowhere, and you're going to find it. And there's kind of the reverse too. You're going to be like, I got this, and then your head blows up on the arena, and you're like, oh, didn't realize I had this random card on the sideboard I've never seen before.
I think my favorite play is usually people trading me their food token for my Golos and then playing a Teferi and bouncing my Golos back to my hand and playing it. That's always the feel goods.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people, as they play these matchups more, as you play the mirror more, you start to respect those interactions. But I think this deck, especially amongst all the ones in standard, really reward repetition and getting your reps in. But when we talk about your sideboard, because we read over the cards again, really quickly again, we have the 2 Veils, 2 Assassin's Trophy, the Devout Decree, the Plaza of Harmony, the Ashiok, the Deafening Clarion, 2 Negates, the Prison Realm, the Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, the Ethereal Absolution, the Time Wipe, and the Garruk. I'm noticing 2 cards that aren't in your sideboard that I've seen a lot of places.
Yeah, Agent of Treachery is it's fine.
Okay, so have you tried it and you just weren't impressed by what it was doing?
I had 3 of them at one point.
Yeah.
It's one that'll go in and out of my sideboard depending on how I think the metagame is shaping up. One of the things is that the format is actually getting a lot more aggressive now with the Gruul decks and the Teamer decks that are starting to see play. I don't know if you've been playing on Arena this week.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Gruul and Teamer and some versions of Rakdos, and I think people are also starting to figure out the mono red deck a little bit better. So I don't know, the format's just gotten super aggressive, and I just you notice there isn't an Agent of Treachery main. Yeah. And I don't find myself boarding it in. One thing that I wish was in my sideboard was actually a Casualties of War. That's like the one thing that...
Yeah, I've seen that starting to pop up.
I might just cut something else for that, but...
Yeah, and especially because you're running so many black sources, it's not going to be as difficult to cast with your Goloses. I don't think I've seen anyone playing a land in their sideboard, and you have a second Plaza of Harmony. I know we just talked about what the format's looking like. Is that a nod to the aggression that you've started to see on Arena?
So it is that, but also I do want 29 lands on my 75. I think that being able to board up to a land, or even be able to grab a land with Fave Wishes is actually important.
Okay. Yeah, and that's interesting. That's not some technology I've seen out there, but it's definitely one that makes sense when you think about it. And then I had a version of this deck that had 11 wins in the event. The one that I played, that one of my podcast listeners got 11 wins with in the best of one event. I had 2 lands in that sideboard. What was the other one?
A Field of the Dead.
Oh, of course.
I played a Field of the Dead in the board and played a Swamp in the main.
Interesting. So that's... And you could fetch it up with Fae, so if they go Unmoored Ego on you, I know it's best of 1, but if they're main decking Unmoored Ego... That
is what happened, yeah.
That is a gotcha moment. So that's very interesting tech. I also haven't seen Garruk really anywhere in the format. Has he had an impact for you when you played him?
Oh my gosh, I've won every game I've against this card. Yeah, this card's been really good. One thing to note, it is not a Apex Predator, so if you played with that card, its minus does not kill Planeswalkers, which I definitely have just grabbed thinking it did that, and it's like, I'm stupid. No, the card's been really good. I think it's I know that I've seen people with different haymakers in their sideboard, even just Agent of Treachery, we just talked about that. I just think that this does mostly the same thing without killing a land. I just don't think stealing your opponent's Field of the Dead is going to be how you're going to win matches in the mirror match.
Yeah.
And and I also can't grab Agent of Treachery with Fae. I don't know. It's just a haymaker that I've been enjoying. It's been really good. It's part of the reason that there's more black sources. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I really like how that all works together. So when we talk about this deck, you're on the play. You play your Forest. You play your Grazer. your opponent goes, what are you hoping to see them play turn one? Are you hoping for a mirror? What don't you want to see? What are some decks you like to see and not see with this deck when you're playing it?
I'm fine playing the mirror. I think the only deck that I don't want to play against is Gruul. I don't know why people haven't realized how good that matchup is for Gruul yet, but it's like a beating.
It just hates tribal. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that for what it's worth, that the green-black Knights deck is favored against this deck if they're playing like the Lucky Clover version. Like, I actually do think that deck drains enough once Lucky Clovers are in play that like you can just die out of nowhere. But the only like deck that I'm like super worried about is Gruul. I think that it hits like a truck. It's really fast. And you know, it has just enough disruption on key turns. And Embercleave is just a beating. Like if your opponent puts an Embercleave like on their creature, you're probably just dead with this deck. So
yeah, no, I've had the Collision Colossus, then the Embercleave on their Gruul Spellbreaker, and you just look and say, all right, well, that was fun for the 3 turns this game lasted. But yeah, I think Gruul is definitely increasing its share. I think just the issue with a lot of these decks is that they're so good against Golos, but against the rest of the meta, they might not have the win percentage to be viable against an unknown field. But I think Gruul is slowly getting tuned to really be not just good against Golos, but a good deck to take into the rank queues on Arena. So when you play against the Mirror, what are you trying to do? Because if you play on Arena, there's a good chance you're going to be playing the Mirror if you pick up this deck. So what are some of your strategies for playing the Mirror?
Well, first of all, unlike a lot of the mirrors who are cutting, their decks that are cutting Grazers, I kept my Grazers at 3. I think that you want to be playing Grazer, and I think that one thing that I've noticed about the mirror is just like people not knowing what their deck is trying to do, not keeping in the right cards for sideboarding. I think that the matchup actually comes down to like. Really, I think it comes down to goals activations, if you ask me, is really what the mirror starts becoming about. The problem is that we're both gonna wipe each other's zombies infinity times, and if we don't, we're just gonna die anyway. So the game's not gonna be about zombies. Like, it's just not what it's gonna be about. Yeah. And then like getting a turn where you can Kenrith is gonna be really important. Whether it's Kenrithing all your zombies to give them haste or something along those lines. I think that that's what the mirror match has become about. I don't know. What is your opinion?
So I think Kenrith activating the haste trample mode is probably the number one way I've won. Although I've been picking up Chance for Glory in my sideboard, and when your opponent's not ready for that card is just a beating.
Yeah, I thought about that card as well. That's the 3-mana take an extra combat step or a turn or whatever.
Yeah, so it's red, white, colorless. It's take a turn after this one, and then you lose the game on the next end step. But your creatures get indestructible at first, so you can swing with your whole zombie army. And then they have to block. So that card's been good, especially when people aren't ready for it. Because, they'll have like 2 extra zombies on board. They'll swing with all theirs. They think they're going to like do something. And then you just kind of get them. I think that's one of those cards that when people are ready for it, it'll lose kind of its upside. But right now, when people aren't ready for it, it's good. And then I've seen some nonsense. Have you seen the Tectonic Rift, Eternal Skylord cards yet? People have been playing in the decks.
I have seen that. I actually want to bring up rewind to what you just said. I've actually beaten the card that you're talking about. They Fave Wish for it and then cast it and realized they couldn't win because I had the Ethereal Absolution in play, and they actually couldn't attack through my zombies because my zombies were bigger than theirs.
Oh wow, yeah. So I guess that's a lesson, even in complicated board states, because if you've been playing this deck at all, you realize everything on Arena starts to shrink. Your cards, you have to use the arrow to see your lands, but don't miss that Ethereal Absolution or other relevant cards on the battlefield because that Chance for Glory becomes a disaster.
Yeah, I think the mirror is more interesting than people give credit for. Mm-hmm. It's going to be about sequencing. I do want to be making zombies first. I think that is important. Whether they're playing Oko or Teferi, or whether you're just getting them into a position where your Kenrith can kill them before their Kenrith can kill you. Chipping away at that life total is actually pretty relevant in the matchup, which is another reason that I think Grazer is totally great. But yeah, I think that, that's kind of where my head's been at. Funnily enough, you asked me about the Jace, and while the Jace Jace can come up in the mirror, I don't know that I've actually ever won a game with Jace in the mirror. It seems like it always either gets trophied or, something happens to it, or I don't know. I haven't had that happen yet. I've obviously cast it, but
yeah, I think I've only won with Jace the day Brad Nelson put his article out there about that technology. I think it might not everyone had read it yet, or you might not have like the SCG Premium, but within like 2 or 3 days, it became kind of a known thing. But I was playing Carlos Romeo on Arena, so we were getting down to the end of our decks. I had 3 cards left. He had like 2 cards. And he must have known I had the Fae of Wishes going for Jace. So he fade for Unmoored Ego and egoed my Fae and then beat me just kind of because I decked myself. So that's one of those things to keep in mind too. If someone's playing this Get Met Mirror, they're going down to 2 cards, there's probably a good chance they're trying to do something with Jace. So if you have, if they have Teferi in play, there's not a whole lot you can do. But if you have an Assassin's Trophy or something that can interact with that Planeswalker on the turn they're supposedly going to win, it's definitely something to keep in mind that you could steal a game with it.
Yeah, another thing that I bring up when talking about the sideboard is just like Veil of Summer actually counters Agent of Treachery.
Yes.
So that's another reason that I really haven't liked Agent of Treachery. You spend 7 mana and it gets kind of negated by a 1 mana spell.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because there's a card in your deck that kind of invalidates the Veil of Summers and the negates. That's, of course, Teferi Time Raveler. So I see you still have 2 Teferis, but I've seen some people have been cutting Teferi for Oko. So what was your thought process on keeping Teferi over Oko? Did you try Oko at all? Have you considered a split? How did that work out for you?
Yeah, so the first time that I saw Oko was actually in a split. So I think I did a couple of matches with Oko, and immediately liked it less than Teferi. Here's the thing: is Teferi is still probably the best card in Standard, and while I've also tried this deck with 0, I mean, I even mentioned like you could just cut 2 Teferis, play another Beanstalk Giant, and play another, Once Upon a Time, and your deck would be totally fine. I think that if you're going to play a Planeswalker in the deck, I would rather play Teferi than Oko. The only thing that I've seen Oko do is like steal opposing Goloses, which is fine, except that if I have Teferi and you do that, I just bounce it back.
Right, exactly.
And that doesn't matter.
Okay, yeah, because I've kind of arrived on Teferi too after trying both. I think Teferi is just a stronger card. And what Teferi lets you do is when you're going for the Kenrith turn or the Jace turn, it just gives you that insurance that they can't do anything right now. That it's my turn, I'm going to win the game. And I think that's a very important thing when we get late in the game. When people have cards in hand with, on the last couple turns, they're saving, they have their silver bullets, and that just invalidates everything, which is great. So I guess the last thing we're going to do when we talk about this deck is if you had a tournament tomorrow, what would you change from this 75? Would you register it as? What have you been considering to make this deck better?
I would not play Golos if I had a tournament tomorrow.
Wow, okay, so you ready just, as the former host, my next question, which of course is going to be, going forward, would you play this deck? So if you had a tournament, what would you be playing, Spencer?
I would be playing Gruul. I think that Gruul is positioned against this deck and the other aggro decks, and I think that I think that your only horrendous matchups are the 2 Jeskai Fires decks with Gruul. I think they're both pretty bad for you, but whatever. Those decks are going to lose to this deck anyway, and there's going to be way more of this deck, so I'm going to play the deck that I think is the best position deck right now. If I was going to play this deck, I would probably register this 60 with probably a slightly different sideboard. I don't know that I would play Ashiok or Deafening Clarion anymore, and I would probably consider some other stuff, but I think that this 60, I've been really, really happy with it.
Okay. I think that it's really hard to go wrong when you register a 60 that looks like this. I mean, you could have those nuanced decisions, which lands do I want to play, which guild gates, but for the most part, as long as you keep the core of this deck intact, you're going to probably be okay. So, Spencer, I think that's going to be wrapping up the first ever episode of Mythicast with me as a host and you as a guest. So, Spencer, I think a lot of our listeners probably know what you're all about, but Spencer, plug some of your stuff. What are you up to that's, now that you're not doing Mythicast?
So you can find me at CCMTG for my podcast. I'll also be trolling the arena. If you tweeted a podcast, I'll see it. I have the podcast network, so I own 3 podcasts. I own this one, I own Constructive Criticism, and I own Common Knowledge. And it's cool. It's something that I really enjoy doing. I enjoy doing the YouTube channel, and then I'm going to be starting doing. One of the reasons I actually wanted you to take over is so that I could dedicate that time to different content. I want to get and use my nerd YouTube channel. So I have a nerdy YouTube channel called Easy Game Media, where it's kind of just about whatever, video game reviews, movie reviews, trailer reaction videos, just kind of like stuff that I enjoy, and content creation is really fun for me, and so I wanted to be able to branch out. I want to be able to talk about Fire Emblem 3 Kingdoms or Super Smash Bros.
Yeah, that's awesome. Speaking of nerdy, so my wife and I, we just moved into a house, and I bought myself a housewarming gift. I got the arcade 1-up Ninja Turtles machine for the basement. I don't know.
Nice.
So I'm looking forward to when my daughter, she's only 5 months old now, but hopefully in a couple years, put her on a little stool and we can co-op that game. Because some of my favorite memories as a kid are being in an arcade playing that game with my buddies. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So Spencer, the final question I have for you is there is a banned and restricted announcement that got moved up to October 21st. What's getting banned from Standard, if anything?
I hope nothing.
You hope nothing? Okay.
I think the Standard format's pretty great. I think that there's, right now, I think that you could say that there are two real viable decks in the form of Golos and Gruul. And I think that number will only go up as the format gets established. Like, I actually think that the matchup for Gruul against Bant is, like, really, really good. And I don't know, maybe Golos can adjust. Maybe it becomes Sultai, and all of a sudden this is a stupid conversation, and maybe we should just ban Golos. I don't know. I don't really know that I like banning Field of the Dead, because I think that card's super beatable. I think that the problem has become... I mean, just think of how many win conditions that we have, and think of, let's just talk about the win conditions really fast. Yeah. So Fae of Wishes searches me for any card that I want that I could think of playing. As long as it's not a creature. It also happens to be a 1/4 that blocks.
Right, against aggro, it's such a good card to put out there.
Yeah.
I think it was the Fry on it. That's insane.
Golos is a 3/5, so it's this big huge butt that doesn't die to aggro decks, that also happens to have this endgame activation that wins you the game. Hydroid Crisis was literally the most dominant card in Magic for multiple months.
Yeah, absolutely, a couple seasons.
And then Once Upon a Time is probably just the best card in the new set, and it gets to play that card and pick up a Rampant Growth or a Wrath effect. So I don't know, the deck kind of just added up to being great. But I think once you start adding cards to the pool, to the card pool, and I don't know, it's week 2, guys. I don't know.
Yeah, I think a lesson is in the Kethis deck. If you go back and listen to my first appearance on this podcast, that's the deck we talked about, and that deck came out of nowhere. People thought Standard was stalled, it's vampires, and then suddenly, Strasky, Flock, Sivka, they're like, we're going to break the format. We're all going to qualify for the MC that's coming up this weekend, and they broke it. So I think, banning a card this early on is a dangerous precedent for them to set. But if Field of the Dead dominates the Mythic Championship, that might be what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you wanted to keep this deck around and make sure that people could still play with their cards, I would ban Field of the Dead. I think if you ban, either one of them, I think the deck can survive without. But I don't know. I hope they don't. I hope that this gets to be a part of the format.
Yeah, me too. So it'll be interesting to see how the Mythic Championship goes, and in a week from now, what we are looking at in terms of banned and restricted. Spencer?
So really quick, decks are already submitted for the Mythic Championship.
Yes.
So I don't think that we will see Golos go down to the Mythic Championship, because I don't think that people have started to figure it out until these last couple days.
Yeah, I think that we're going to look at the decks that are registered. I believe they come out on Monday, which will be after this episode is posted. So the decks will be out. And I think my prediction, we can see if I'm right, is that it's going to be a very, very heavily skewed field towards Golos. I know the last MC, almost everyone was playing Esper. I think it's going to be similar numbers this time around with Golos. But, people claim they have the tech to beat it. So it'll be interesting to see this weekend what happens.
Yep.
All right. Spencer, thank you so much for joining us on the Mythicast. I feel like the symbolic passing of the torch moment. So Spencer, thank you again.
Thank you.
All righty. Have a great day, everyone.